Hello, and I welcome back to our deep dive. Today, we are on a mission, a very specific and honestly pretty high stakes mission,
Absolutely.
because if you are listening to this right now, chances are you are standing at the precipice of a massive moment in your career. You're in that weird limbo state.
Oh, the limbo state is so real.
Right. I mean, you've finished university maybe years ago at this point. You have logged your work hours. You've painstakingly entered every single task into that online portal, which we all know is a joy.
Such a joy.
You've done the mentorship meetings. You've bought the coffees. You've had the somewhat awkward conversations about your future goals. You've even slogged through the ethics course. And now there is just one final gatekeeper standing between you and those glorious letters behind your name, getting your RPP or LPP.
That is right. Today we are doing a completely comprehensive, no-nonsense breakdown of the Professional Examination Study Guide for the Professional Standards Board, or the PSB for the planning profession in Canada.
And we should specify our sources right off the bat.
Good point. Specifically, we are looking at the version 10.1 May 2025 edition. This document is literally the thing that stands between you and full certification.
So if you are the planner and for the next hour or so, that is exactly who you are to us, this is your roadmap.
Yeah.
We're going to decode the logistics, the strategy, and the four massive content areas that you need to master to pass this thing.
Because the study guide really is your Bible for the next few weeks.
Exactly. And we're going to tear it apart and put it back together so you understand exactly what the PSB is looking for. But before we dive into the nuts and bolts, I really want to address the vibe in the room.
The stress, you mean?
The immense dread. I talked to a lot of candidates, and the overwhelming feeling isn't excitement, it's dread. It's this feeling of, I've been doing this job for years. Why do I have to take a test to prove I can do it again?
Yeah, that is a completely valid feeling. It's what we kind of call the imposter syndrome gate.
Oh, I like that term.
Because you've been paid to do planning by an employer, but you don't have the official stamp. But it is so important to frame this correctly right from the start. The PSB study guide really tries to reframe this whole experience for you.
How so?
It is not just a hurdle designed to trip you up. It is the final confirmation of your readiness. It's specifically designed to assess if you possess the professional knowledge to provide an independent opinion. Do you understand the public interest? Are you committed to ethical practice?
So it's a mindset shift.
Exactly.
Right.
It's essentially the profession asking you, are you ready to join us as a peer?
Right. It's less about memorizing obscure dates from the history of urban sprawl and more about thinking like a pro. It's an identity shift. You're stopping being a student or a junior planner, and you're becoming a guardian of the public trust.
That's a great way to put it. Guardian of the public trust.
So here is our journey for this deep dive. We are going to start with the logistics.
Yeah.
The what and the how of the test itself. Then we are going to move into preparation strategies, like how to actually study without completely losing your mind.
Which is very possible to do.
Highly possible. And then the meat and potatoes. We are going deep into the four core content areas. That's public interest, professional responsibility, ethics, and emerging issues.
It is a lot of ground to cover, but if we break it down section by section, it really does become much more manageable. The guide itself is actually structured this way for a reason, and we're going to mirror that exact structure to keep things crystal clear for you.
Perfect. So let's start with the basics, the logistics, because honestly, nothing induces panic like not knowing the rules of the game. What are we looking at here?
First off, format. This is an online examination.
So no driving to a damp convention center on a Saturday morning with a handful of number 2 pencils.
Thankfully, no. Gone are those days. You are doing this digitally, likely from your own home or office. But there are strict prerequisites. You cannot just sign up on a whim because you feel like taking a test.
Right.
You need your logbook approved, your full 1 year of mentorship, concluded to the satisfaction of the PSB, and you need to have completed the Ethics and Professionalism course.
Okay, so no skipping steps. This really is the capstone. Now, talk to me about the pressure cooker. What are the constraints on the day of the exam?
It is a 3-hour closed book exam.
Closed book.
Completely closed. That means no notes, no Google, no textbook, no phoning a friend. Just you and your brain. And in those 3 hours, you have to answer 90 multiple choice questions.
Okay, let me do the math. 90 questions in 180 minutes. That's actually reasonable. That's like 2 minutes a question.
It sounds totally reasonable on paper, but
Yeah.
you really have to factor in reading time, especially for the scenario-based questions, which can be quite dense. But we will get to pacing in a moment.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about the metrics of passing first, because this is where people get wide-eyed. This is a pass or fail exam. You don't get a letter grade. You aren't aiming for an A+ to put on your fridge. But the magic number to pass the threshold is 80%.
Hold on, let's pause there. 80%.
Yep.
I really want to contextualize that for a second for the listener. In most professional exams, like if you look at law or engineering, the cut score is usually floating around 60 or maybe 70%. You can get a C and still be a lawyer in some jurisdictions. Why is the planning board demanding an A- average just to get in the door? That seems incredibly aggressive.
It is high. It's undeniably high. And the guide itself acknowledges that the examination is rigorous. But you have to think about the nature of the profession.
Okay.
Planners are making decisions that affect the environment. They affect public safety. They dictate long-term community health. If a surgeon makes a terrible mistake, unfortunately, one person might get hurt. If a planner makes a mistake, say you approve a subdivision in a floodplain, or you ignore a massive traffic conflict.
That mistake is literally built into the landscape.
Exactly. It gets built into the physical landscape for 50, maybe 100 years. The margin for error in the built environment is incredibly slim.
Wow.
So the PSB isn't just looking for okay planners. They're actively filtering for people who won't make those generational mistakes. The bar has to be that high to ensure public trust.
That actually puts it in a totally different perspective. It's not about being academically smart. It's about being safe.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. High
Yeah.
stakes, high standards. Now strategy time. What happens if I'm sitting there, I'm staring at question 45, and I have absolutely zero idea what the answer is? Do I leave it blank to be safe?
No, never leave a blank.
Never.
Never. The scoring logic in this exam is very specific. There are 0 deductions for incorrect answers.
Okay.
If you skip it, you get a guaranteed 0. If you guess, you at least have a statistical probability of getting it right. So actionable advice number 1 for the listener right now, answer every single question. Even if you are blindly clicking C with 10 seconds left, it is always better than leaving it blank. That is extremely good to know. And what if the worst happens? What if you take it and you just don't hit that 80%?
I'll get 3 attempts.
Okay, 3 tries. That's generous.
It is. If you fail the first time, you do get some feedback on which specific sections you were weak in, but they will not give you your exact grade.
They won't tell you if you got a 79.
No, they keep that under wraps. But if you fail 3 times, and this is the genuinely scary part, you have to restart the entire certification process.
Oof. Wait, back to the logbooks.
To the logbooks, back to the mentorship, back to the ethics course, everything. It is a full, hard reset.
That is devastating.
It really is. So the goal is obviously to nail this within those first 3 tries. You really, really want to avoid that restart scenario at all costs.
Understood. Let's look at the questions themselves then so we don't fail. You mentioned multiple choice, but are they all just straightforward knowledge recall? Like, what is the definition of a zoning bylaw?
No, it's more complex than that. There are 2 types. There are standard multiple choice, which do test your knowledge of concepts. But then there are case study multiple choice questions. And these are the ones where seasoned planners often get tripped up.
Who so? Why are those harder?
Well, the guide describes these as having a detailed description of a professional planning situation, a scenario. You have to analyze the information and choose the best course of action. But here is the absolute crucial constraint, and the guide is bold and italic about this.
Okay.
These case studies are concise. They cannot possibly contain every single detail of a real-life situation.
So the trap is overthinking it.
Let's really dig into the anatomy of a trap question here. The guide warns about the scenarios being concise, but what that really means in practice is you have to suspend your disbelief.
Right.
You're going to read a scenario about a heritage building, and your brain, because you're a smart, experienced planner, is going to start screaming, wait, what about the provincial policy statement? What about the local zoning bylaw? What about the shadow impact?
Right. You're trying to solve the problem with your whole degree and all your work experience. You're trying to be a good planner in the real world.
Exactly. And that is exactly how you fail the question.
Interesting.
You have to treat the paragraph on the screen like a sealed universe. If the paragraph doesn't mention the provincial policy statement, then in this specific universe, it doesn't exist. You basically have to suffocate your inner expert and only use the tools they explicitly put on the table.
Like a vacuum. If the prompt says the sky is green for the purpose of that question, the sky is green.
Precisely. You answer only based on the information provided in the case study. Do not import outside baggage.
That is such a massive key tip. Don't fight the question. Live inside the reality of the paragraph.
It saves so many people once they grasp that.
Okay, let's move to section 2, preparation strategy. How do we actually get ready for this? What does the PSB data say about successful candidates?
The PSB actually gathers a lot of feedback from previous candidates, which is incredibly helpful. The data shows that 88% of candidates spend 2 months or longer preparing.
2 months.
Yes. And in terms of actual hours logged, the average preparation time is around 40 hours plus or minus a bit.
So this isn't a cram the weekend before situation. That's a full, typical work week of just studying.
Definitely not a cramming scenario. If you are trying to stuff 40 hours of study into one long weekend fueled by energy drinks, you are setting yourself up for burnout, not success.
Yeah, your brain just won't hold it.
The guide specifically suggests that smaller, manageable study periods over a longer duration are much more effective. You want to digest this material slowly, not just swallow it whole. You really need to sleep on these concepts to let them integrate into how you think.
And what are we actually doing during those 40 hours? Because just reading the guide over and over again from front to back sounds mind-numbing.
It would be terrible. That's why the guide recommends a very specific technique called the 3 reads. It's a way to layer your learning so it actually sticks in your long-term memory.
Walk me through that.
Read 1 is simply for concepts and themes. You aren't trying to memorize every word. You are just trying to get the lay of the land. You're skimming to understand the structure of the document and the big buckets of information.
Okay, so a fast pass.
Exactly. Then read 2 is the heavy lifting. This is where you get at the highlighter, you write notes in the margins, and this is crucial. You write down specific questions for your mentor.
Ah, yes. The mentor. I feel like for a lot of people, the mentorship period is just meeting for coffee once a month and signing some forms to keep the board happy. But the guide seems to really lean heavily on this relationship for the exam prep itself.
It really does.
Yes.
It explicitly says you should review the guide with your mentor. This isn't just about having someone sign your logbook anymore. It's about deep discussion. The concepts we're going to talk about, like ethics and public interest, they're highly nuanced.
They're great.
Very gray. Discussing them with a senior planner helps you understand the actual real-world application, not just the academic theory. The guide says, and I quote, "The importance of choosing a mentor with whom you can speak frankly and critically cannot be overstated."
That makes total sense. You need someone who can say, yeah, the book says X, but here's how we actually apply X in a really messy political situation.
Exactly. You need that bridge between theory and practice.
So you grab your mentor, you grab the study guide. What else is in our prep toolkit?
The CIP Code of Professional Conduct. This is absolutely central to the whole exam. It is provided as Appendix 1 in the guide.
Yeah.
You need to know this thing inside and out.
Memorize it.
Here is the relief. You don't need to memorize the exact number of every single clause.
Oh, thank goodness.
Right. But you absolutely must understand the application. You don't necessarily need to know that 2.4 is the clause for confidentiality off the top of your head. But if you get a scenario about it, you need to understand exactly how the application of confidentiality works in practice.
That's a huge relief. Understanding over blind memorization of numbers. Okay, let's fast forward a bit to examination day. What is the actual protocol when you log in?
First, the guide advises you to treat it like a job interview or a presentation to counsel. That is the mental space you need to be in. But practically speaking, you need a completely private room. You have to do a full 360-degree room scan with your webcam for the proctor.
Oh, wow. To prove you don't have sticky notes plastered on the wall behind the monitor.
Precisely. No phones, no smartwatches, no books, anywhere in reach.
So I basically have to deeply clean my home office for the first time in a year.
You literally have to clean it. If you have a bookshelf right next to your desk, you might even be asked to throw a blanket over it. It has to be a completely sterile testing environment.
Wow, okay. And what about pacing during those 3 hours? You mentioned earlier we have about 2 minutes a question.
The guides suggest actively blocking your time so you don't lose track. Aim to complete about 25 to 28 questions per hour. If you hit that rhythm, you will finish all 90 questions with a few minutes to spare at the end to review any that you flagged as difficult. It really helps you keep moving so you don't get paralyzed on one tricky case study and just run out the clock.
Okay, that's solid advice. Logistics check. Strategy check. Now let's get into the deep water, the actual content you're being tested on. There are 4 main areas, and the first one is a massive one, public interest.
It is. This is the cornerstone of the entire profession. Honestly, it's the main reason the planning profession even exists. But the guide admits right up front that public interest is multifaceted and sometimes really hard to define.
Which is helpful theoretically, but also terrifying for a multiple choice exam. When I hear multifaceted, that usually means there's no single right answer.
Well, you have to think of it by what it isn't first. It's not just doing what the loudest neighborhood group wants.
Right. The NIMBY crowd.
And it is not just rubber stamping what the wealthy developer wants either. It involves actively reconciling incredibly diverse interests. Environmental concerns, social equity, economic viability. It's about looking at the really big picture and the long term.
And the guide ties this abstract concept directly to Section 1 of the code. What are the specific pillars we need to know here?
There are 4 key pillars under the public interest section of the code. Number 1, respect diversity and encourage discussion. Number 2, provide clear and accurate information.
Yeah.
Number 3, acknowledge the interrelated nature of decisions. For example, how a decision about a new arterial road affects the natural environment nearby. And number 4, provide meaningful participation opportunities.
Meaningful participation, that's a buzzword we hear all the time in this industry, but the guide actually gives us some practice scenarios to show what that looks like when the rubber hits the road right.
It does.
Let's look at the first one, the sports team conflict. This one feels oddly specific, but also very realistic.
Oh, this is a classic small-town planning dilemma. So you have scheduled a public open house for a new development. It's been on the municipal calendar for weeks. All the notices went out. But then out of nowhere, the local sports team makes the playoffs, and the massive championship game is scheduled for the exact same time as your meeting.
And if you've ever lived in a small town, that means literally everyone is at the game. The mayor is at the game. The angry residents are at the game. Even your boss is probably at the game.
Exactly. So what do? Do you hold the meeting anyway? You could easily argue that you gave statutory notice. You followed the Planning Act to the letter. You ticked the legal box.
Right. I can just picture someone saying, I did my job, my hands are tied, nobody showed up, meeting adjourned. We can move forward.
And that is the bureaucrat answer. But the professional planner answer, the one that passes the exam, is to reschedule the meeting.
Even though it's a huge hassle.
Yes. The rationale ties directly back to Section 1.4. Provide opportunities for meaningful participation. If the entire town is at the hockey game, they aren't participating. Holding the meeting in an empty room might tick a legal box, but it completely violates the spirit of the public interest because you are knowingly excluding the community.
That's a really great distinction to make, the difference between strictly following the rules and actually acting in the public interest. Sometimes the legal requirement is just the floor, it isn't the ethical ceiling.
Perfectly said.
Love to do another one from the guide. The stormwater pond.
This one is designed to test your professional backbone. A local counselor explicitly wants to waive a requirement for a stormwater pond for a developer.
Why?
Maybe they want the project to move faster to get tax revenue. Maybe they want to save the developer money. Or maybe they just think stormwater ponds look ugly. But you, as the reviewing planner, know, based on the engineering, that the pond is absolutely critical for site drainage.
Okay, so just do what the counselor says. I mean, they are the elected official after all. They theoretically represent the will of the people. If the people's representative says no pond, who am I as an unelected staffer to say yes pond?
That is the eternal tension in public planning, isn't it?
Yeah.
Staff versus council. But the solution here for the exam is firm. You must acknowledge the need for the pond publicly. You have to explain exactly why it is necessary in your report.
You can't just fold.
No. This links to Section 1.3, consequences for natural and human environments. Your professional obligation to public safety and environmental protection fundamentally takes precedence over political pressure to cut corners.
Okay, I hear you. And on paper, in a study guide, that sounds very noble. But let's be real for a second. Let's say I'm a junior planner. This counselor approves my entire department's budget next month. They play golf with my boss. If I write a staff report effectively calling their idea reckless, I'm not just doing my duty, I'm potentially tanking my own career. Does the study guide actually acknowledge how scary that reality is?
It doesn't pretend it's easy, but it makes it very clear that it's mandatory. And this is where the core concept of an independent professional opinion essentially saves you.
How does that save me?
Because you aren't standing up there saying the counselor is wrong or the counselor is corrupt. You are saying, based on technical standards A, B, and C, and the watershed metrics the pond is required for public safety, you hide behind the technical rigor. That's your professional shield. You are acting as the expert witness to the physical reality. Water doesn't care about municipal politics, it just flows downhill. Your job is simply to remind them of that objective fact.
That's actually quite empowering when you frame it that way. It reminds you that you are a technical expert, not just an order taker for politicians.
Let's hit one more from this section, the misleading article.
Right. In this scenario, you see a media post or an article with blatantly incorrect info about a planning project you're working on. Maybe a local blog post says a new factory is going to dump toxic sludge into the river, when you know for a fact it's actually a completely clean tech facility. Okay, so what's my move? Do I jump into the Facebook comments section? Do I start a Twitter war with the blogger?
Absolutely not. Getting into a flame war online is highly unprofessional. But doing nothing is also the wrong answer on the exam.
So what's the middle ground?
The solution is to officially identify the error and recommend a formal process to correct it, like advising your communications department to issue a formal correction or press release. Section 1.2 of the code requires you to provide accurate information. Leaving the public misinformed when you have the facts is a failure of your duty. You have to correct the record, but you do it through official professional channels.
Okay, let's just unpack this whole first section. Public interest isn't just this vague philosophical vibe. It's about taking specific, concrete actions. Ensuring real participation, protecting the physical environment from bad decisions, and actively correcting misinformation.
Precisely. Yeah. And achieving all of that requires what the guide calls enabling competencies, specifically critical thinking and interpersonal integrity. You use those interpersonal tools to negotiate and determine what the public interest actually is in any given messy situation.
Fantastic. Moving on to content area 2. Professional responsibility. This sounds like it pivots from the public to how we deal with the people who actually sign our paychecks.
It does. This area covers Section 2 of the code, clients and employers. And there is a major North Star concept guiding this whole section,
Which is?
independent professional opinion.
We touched on that with the pond. What does it mean broadly?
It means that while you absolutely serve the client and you definitely want to help them achieve their business goals, your professional opinion must remain independent. You cannot just write whatever they want you to hear to get the approval.
Because you're a planner, not a PR firm.
Exactly. You are selling your technical expertise, not your integrity. Section 2.1 is very, very clear on maintaining that boundary.
This section also deals with the sticky stuff. Conflict of interest. Let's talk about moonlighting. Can I have a second job as a planner?
This comes up all the time. The answer is yes, but with a massive asterisk. You can have a second job, but it cannot conflict with your primary job or create even a perception of influence. And this is the big rule. It must be formally disclosed to your primary employer.
So no secret side hustles drafting plans for developers in the same town where you review applications.
Exactly. Transparency is the only way it works. If you feel like you need to hide it, it's probably a code violation.
What about volunteer work? I feel like planners are inherently civic-minded. We are always volunteering for community groups. We love our neighborhoods.
And that is a great quality, but it has strict boundaries under the code. If you are volunteering, you cannot provide professional planning advice without disclosing conflicts. The guide gives a really great scenario here. A planner is asked to present for their neighborhood group against a proposed high-density project down the street.
That sounds tricky. Because you are a resident, you pay taxes, you live there. Don't you have a fundamental right to protect your own property value?
You do as a private citizen, but you cannot use your professional credentials to do it. The exam solution is you must decline the request to present.
Just flat out decline.
Yes, because there is a blatant conflict between your personal interests as a local resident and your professional appearance. You can't put on your professional planner hat to fight a battle for your personal backyard without it looking incredibly messy. It creates a perception of bias that damages the entire profession's reputation for neutrality.
That makes sense. It dilutes the brand of the RPP. What about inducements? I love that word. It sounds like an old corporate spy movie. But we are basically talking about bribery, right?
Essentially, yes. This is section 2.7. The study guide scenario goes like this. A family member of a developer offers a large donation to a local charity in exchange for you, the planner, speaking in favor of their project at a council meeting.
But it's for charity. That's inherently good for us. No one is buying a yacht here. No one is getting handed a briefcase of cash.
It honestly doesn't matter where the money goes. It is an inducement. You're being offered something of value to actively influence your professional opinion. You have to decline it immediately. Even if the money doesn't go into your pocket, the influence has been bought. The public needs to trust that your opinion is based purely on sound planning principles, not on who generously donated to the local cat shelter.
Okay, here is one that I think confuses a lot of people shifting sectors. Confidentiality versus the code.
Ah, yes. This is where the timeline of your career really matters. Imagine a scenario where a planner moves from the private sector to the public sector. Say they used to work for a big consulting firm. In their old private job, they signed a strict non-disclosure agreement an NDA about a massive secret development project.
Okay, tracking.
Now, a year later, they're working at the city planning department, and an application comes across their desk for that exact same secret project.
So they know everything about it. They know the margins, they know the developer's real bottom line, they know where the bodies are buried, so to speak. Do they use that insider info to get a better deal for the city?
Absolutely not. They have to immediately advise their municipal manager of the conflict and the existence of the NDA, and then they must completely recuse themselves. They cannot work on the file at all.
You just have to tap out.
They tap out. They can't use the secret info to help the city, but they also can't pretend they don't know it. They just have to step away entirely. Section 2.4 strictly respects the former client's right to confidentiality. You can't weaponize your past knowledge against a former client just because you switch teams.
That makes perfect sense. It protects everyone involved. Now, there's a fascinating scenario in this section about climate change. I was surprised to see that. How does climate change fit into professional responsibility on the exam?
This is a really modern application of the code, and a very important one. The scenario involves a junior public planner reviewing a subdivision that was designed by a very senior, well-respected colleague. The subdivision layout itself, the lots, the density, it's all fine. But the reviewing planner knows that the main access road, which is an existing road, regularly floods due to recent climate change impacts.
But wait, the new subdivision design itself is fine. The proposed houses aren't flooding.
Correct. The houses are safe. And remember, it was designed by a senior colleague, so there's a lot of unspoken pressure to just be nice, check the box, and let it go. You really don't want to embarrass a senior planner who might be your mentor or your future boss.
Right. The classic stay in your lane kid mentality.
Exactly. But the only correct solution on the exam is you must formally comment on the road flooding.
You can't let it slide.
You cannot. Your professional competence regarding climate change impacts, plus your overarching duty to public safety, absolutely overrides being polite to a colleague. You cannot approve 50 new homes if the only way in and out for an ambulance is underwater 3 times a year. The guide is explicitly telling you that professional hierarchy does not trump public safety, ever.
That is such a powerful example. It really shows that professional responsibility isn't just about filing paperwork correctly. It's about having the courage to speak up when something is physically dangerous, even if it makes the office politics incredibly awkward.
Exactly. It shows that competency and safety will always trump politeness in the eyes of the PSB.
All right, let's slide into content area 3, ethics. We have talked about public interest. We've talked about responsibility to the client. What is ethics focusing on specifically that's different?
This focuses heavily on the planner's relationship to the profession itself and to other members. This is Section 3 of the code. And it really boils down to 2 main standards: competency and integrity.
Competency seems fairly straightforward. Just be good at your job.
Ideally, yes. But on the exam, it also means knowing exactly what you aren't good at. Planners are definitely not expected to be experts in every single technical field. The guide uses a very specific example of a sun shadow study.
Oh, I hate those. Dealing with azimuths and weird angles, it's a nightmare.
Well, if you are a planner asked by a client to do a complex sun shadow study, and you honestly only have a basic rudimentary understanding of the software that experiences, the solution is clear. Do not fake it.
Don't just wing it.
Do not wing it. And interestingly, the 2025 guide specifically mentions this. Do not use AI to do it for you.
Really, the study guide calls out AI specifically now.
It absolutely does in the practice questions. The correct solution is you must research best practices, ask a qualified colleague, or advise the client to hire a specialist. Code 2.1 says you must perform work only within your actual areas of competence. Faking it or letting a generative AI bot do it when you can't verify the math is a major ethical breach.
Because you're stamping it.
Exactly. If you sign off on it, you own the liability.
Yeah.
And if you didn't understand the output because an algorithm generated it, you are professionally negligent.
That is a huge warning for the modern era.
Then we have integrity. And there is a rule here that I know causes a lot of anxiety. The guide calls it the snitch rule. That sounds intense.
It is Section 3.8, and it is arguably one of the hardest parts of the code for people to actually swallow. Members must report the behavior of other members if they believe they are in breach of the code.
Must report, not should report.
Must. You cannot just look the other way.
Give me the scenario they use.
The scenario provided is a planner overhears a professional colleague make an anti-Indigenous remark during a heated public consultation meeting.
Oh, wow.
The guide is very clear here. This is a blatant breach of the code, specifically regarding respecting diversity and human rights. The planner overhearing it must not stay silent. The code requires active intervention. You have to address it in the moment or formally report it to the institute. Silence in this scenario is considered professional complicity. The snitch line. I honestly hate that term, but that's what it feels like. You're telling me if I'm at a conference and I hear a planner from another city make a tasteless joke, I'm professionally obligated to file a formal complaint. That feels so extreme. Does anyone actually do that in the real world?
It feels extreme on an individual level until you view the profession as a collective brand.
Okay, explain that.
If that planner makes that racist remark and the public hears it, the public doesn't say, oh, John Doe is a jerk. They say planners are elitist or planners are prejudiced. You aren't reporting them just to get them in trouble. You're doing it to protect the inherent value and trust of the letters RPP after your own name. If we don't aggressively police ourselves, the government will eventually step in and police us, and we will lose our self-regulating status entirely.
That makes a lot of sense. That connects right back to the idea that we are a self-regulating profession. If we don't hold each other accountable, the credential literally loses its meaning.
Exactly. You are protecting the profession. This section also covers professional courtesy. Don't steal another planner's clients once steps have been taken for their employment. That's formally called supplanting.
Supplanting, good vocab word.
And don't maliciously injure the professional reputation of other planners. We can absolutely disagree on zoning policy or density, but we do not get personal in our critiques.
Okay, we are officially in the home stretch of the content area 4, emerging issues. This sounds like the section that probably changes the most from year to year.
It's very fluid by design. But for the 2025 exam right now, the absolute major focus is reconciliation.
This is a massive topic in Canada right now. How does a multiple choice exam actually approach something so complex?
It bases a lot of its framework on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC, and specifically their calls to action. For the practicing planner, it's really about relationship building, understanding the duty to consult, and actively educating ourselves on Indigenous history and land stewardship.
But wait, do I need to memorize the entire complex legal history of the Indian Act and century-old treaties? Because that is practically a whole law degree on its own.
No, and a guide clarifies that, thankfully. The exam questions focus specifically on the planner's role in the process. You aren't expected to be a constitutional lawyer. You're expected to know that planners are the ones who facilitate the consultation on the ground.
Can you expand on that? What does that mean practically?
Well, most planners know that the Crown, the federal or provincial government, has the ultimate legal duty to consult. That's Law 101. But the exam asks what happens when the Crown delegates the procedural aspects of that consultation to the municipality. And then the municipality delegates it down to the private developer, and suddenly you, the local municipal planner, are holding the bag to make sure it gets done.
Right, you're managing the actual meetings.
Yes. The guide wants you to understand that while the legal duty sits high up in government, the relationship duty is sitting right there on your desk. You need to ensure the consultation is actually meaningful and not just a form letter sent out by registered mail to tick a box.
And I assume the scenario we just talked about, the racist remark, applies heavily here too.
It does. It's an ethical breach under Section 3, sure. But it's also highlighted as an emerging issue of equity and reconciliation. You simply cannot treat systemic racism or prejudiced remarks as unintentional or just let it drop to keep the peace. The planning profession is moving towards active anti-racism as a baseline standard of practice.
Okay, so we have thoroughly covered the content, logistics, strategy, the 4 core pillars, but we really need to talk about the don'ts, because the guide has some very strict and somewhat terrifying warnings about cheating.
It does. And in 2025, the big one they highlight is obviously AI. There is a strict zero-tolerance prohibition on using any AI tools during the online exam. Also, no phones, no notes. Remember, this is literally a professional ethics exam. Cheating on an ethics exam is the ultimate failure of ethics.
Yeah, the irony would be pretty thick. And what about study groups? Because I know a lot of people form Discord servers or group chats to prep. The guide mentions them, right?
Study groups are allowed and even encouraged, but with a massive red flashing warning.
Which is?
Do not rely only on the group. You have to do your own reading. And this is the critical part. Discussing specific questions from previous exams is strictly prohibited. That is formally classified as cheating.
Right, so don't go into a Reddit thread and ask, hey, does anyone remember what question 42 was on the last test?
Exactly. Doing that puts your entire certification at risk. The consequences are severe. A 0 mark in the exam, a formal report to the PSB, and a report to your provincial or territorial institute. You could literally lose your membership status before you even get it. It is absolutely not worth the risk.
Definitely not worth it to shave off a few hours of studying. Now, strangely enough, for a pretty dry institutional study guide, it actually dedicates space to talking about mental health.
I was really happy to see this included, actually. It explicitly mentions maintaining a healthy lifestyle leading up to the test, prioritizing sleep, getting good nutrition. And it suggests staying calm techniques to use during the actual exam, like taking deep breaths or deliberately flagging hard questions to come back to later rather than panicking. It openly acknowledges that exam anxiety is very real and it needs to be actively managed, just like your study notes.
That is actually really nice advice. Treat your brain like an engine that needs proper fuel and rest, not just a hard drive.
Exactly. You can't perform if you're burnt out.
So what does this all mean for the planner listening? We have gone through the online logistics, the 40 hours of prep, the 4 massive pillars. If you were to summarize the big 3 takeaways that they absolutely must remember, what are they?
Okay, big 3. First, public interest. It is the why of everything we do. It's the North Star. Second, independent professional opinion. You are being paid for your objective expertise, not your compliance to a client's whims. And third, ethical conduct. It's about navigating the really difficult gray areas with integrity and competence.
And remember the overarching mindset you mentioned earlier. It's a job interview. They aren't trying to trick you with these questions. They are trying to see if you can think and react like a seasoned professional.
That is the absolute key to passing. And, I want to leave the listener with a final provocative thought to just mull over while they study. We call it the gray zone.
The gray zone.
Because most ethical issues in real life, and the ones that will really test you on the exam, they aren't black and white. It's rarely a scenario of someone blatantly stealing money from the office safe.
Right. It's way more subtle than that.
It is subtle. It is the awkward conflict of interest at a neighborhood BBQ when a neighbor asks for a favor. It is the silent senior colleague during a tense meeting who doesn't speak up. It is the mounting pressure from a developer to approve a subdivision that is mostly okay but has a glaring safety flaw. The exam is fundamentally testing your ability to navigate the gray zone, not just identify the obvious black and white.
That makes total sense.
If you can get comfortable sitting in that gray zone and relying on the CIP code as your compass rather than your gut instinct, you will do just fine on this exam.
That is a brilliant place to leave it. To the planner listening right now, wherever you are, good luck. You've already done the hard work. You know the theory. You know the code. Now just go in there and ace that exam. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Good luck, everyone. You've got this.